You really think selling candles online will make you rich, Emma? He said it with a smirk that cut deeper than he could imagine, the kind of laugh that echoes long after the words fade. I still remember that moment like it was burned into my skin. We were in the break room of Lander and Company, a mid-sized marketing firm where I worked as a junior strategist. Ryan, my team lead, leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers, his arrogance filling the space like smoke. To everyone else, he was charming, confident, the company's golden boy. To me, he was the man who thought he knew everything about success. At that time, my small business was barely more than an idea, a modest candle brand I'd started from my apartment kitchen. I called it Kindle and Glow, something born from late nights and quiet dreams. My coworkers didn't know about it except Ryan, who overheard me talking about it on the phone with a supplier one day. Since then, it became his favorite joke. He'd pass my desk with that grin and say, "Hey, Emma, how's the candle empire going? Sold enough to buy a coffee yet?" And everyone would laugh. I'd smile, pretending it didn't sting. I'd even play along sometimes, hoping if I made it seem funny, it would hurt less. But deep down, it did. Because behind that laughter was something cruel, not just mockery, but disbelief. He didn't just doubt my business, he doubted me. Ryan wasn't just a coworker. He was my mentor once, the one who'd reviewed my first campaign pitch and told me I had potential if I didn't waste it. He'd encouraged me, guided me, even helped me refine my presentations. For a while, I admired him. But the more success he gained, the more he started to change. His compliments turned into comparisons. His mentorship turned into manipulation, subtle, invisible, but real. It started with small things. He'd forget to credit my ideas during meetings. He'd take my data reports and present them as his own. When clients praised my work, he'd joke, "Oh, she's learning from the best," and everyone would nod. He liked control. He liked being above. I told myself it was fine, that it was part of corporate life, that if I worked hard enough, I'd earn his respect again. But something in my gut, that quiet whisper of intuition, kept telling me this wasn't mentorship anymore. It was dominance dressed as guidance. Still, I stayed quiet. I needed the job. I needed stability. Kindle and Glow was just a side project, something fragile, too small to lean on. One afternoon, as I packed up for the day, I overheard Ryan in the hallway talking to another manager. He said, "Emma's sweet, but she's not business material. She's got this Etsy thing going on. Not exactly CEO energy, you know." They both laughed. I stood frozen behind the wall, fingers tightening around my bag strap, feeling that strange mix of pain and awakening. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It was ridicule. It was dismissal. That night, I went home, lit one of my own candles, cedar and resolve, my favorite scent, and sat in the quiet glow. The flame flickered against the jar, steady and small, but it reminded me of something. Small fires still burn. They just need time. Ryan thought my dream was a joke. He thought I was harmless. But deep inside, something was shifting slowly, quietly, dangerously. I didn't know it yet, but that laugh of his would one day cost him everything. And me? It would make me unstoppable. The room smelled like cedar, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. The weeks that followed Ryan's cruel remark felt different. Not loud, not obvious, just subtly colder, sharper in the spaces between us. He still smiled, still called me kiddo in front of others, still played the role of the charming mentor. But there was something else underneath, a tone I hadn't heard before. His compliments started coming with edges, disguised as humor. "Not bad, Emma," he'd say after glancing at my presentation deck. "I mean, it's cute that you're trying to bring your candle shop aesthetic into corporate marketing, but keep it professional, yeah?" Everyone chuckled. I did too, even as my cheeks burned. At first, I told myself it was fine, that Ryan was just teasing like always. But the more I tried to dismiss it, the heavier it became. My instincts whispered, he's not joking anymore. He began excluding me from small project meetings I was usually part of. When I asked why, he said, "Oh, just quick strategy huddles, didn't think you'd be interested." Then came the favoritism. There was a new hire, Clara, young, bright, eager to please, and Ryan adored her. He'd praise her openly, give her projects I'd been expecting to lead. And every time I saw them talking in the hallway, laughing too easily, a familiar ache twisted in my chest. It wasn't jealousy, it was recognition. I'd been there once, the eager student. Now, I was just another background employee. Still, I tried to be rational. Maybe he was just busy. Maybe I was imagining it. But the signs grew clearer. One afternoon, while staying late to finish a campaign draft, I accidentally saw an internal email chain open on the shared computer. Ryan had written, "Emma's too emotionally driven for strategic roles. Her small business hobby is cute, but it's distracting her. Let's give Clara the pitch next week." My stomach dropped. He didn't even CC me, just wrote about me as if I were disposable. I closed the email quietly, my hands trembling, a mix of anger and humiliation rising inside me. My mind screamed to confront him, but my heart, that fragile, conditioned part that still wanted his approval, told me to stay silent. That night, I couldn't sleep. My candles flickered on the desk, soft amber light brushing the walls. The scent of lavender filled the room, meant to calm me, but I couldn't find calm. I kept replaying his words. Too emotional. Distracted. Was he right? Was I too naive to belong in that office? I stared at my tiny stockpile of candle jars, each labeled, hand-poured, imperfect but real. Those candles didn't mock me. They didn't make me feel small. They were mine. Every scent, every label, every late night spent crafting them was mine. But still, I needed my job. I couldn't survive off candle sales alone. So I put my head down and worked harder. I delivered 2 campaigns ahead of schedule, stayed late, double-checked every presentation slide. I wanted to prove, maybe to him, maybe to myself, that I could balance both worlds. The next morning, I overheard Clara in the pantry whispering on the phone. "Yeah, Ryan said I might get promoted soon. He thinks Emma's too distracted lately." She laughed softly. My chest tightened. I realized then, this wasn't just professional rivalry. Ryan was slowly erasing me. Not firing me outright, but cutting pieces of me away, one project, one reputation hit at a time. And the worst part? I let him. Because I still believed I could win him back with results, with effort, with loyalty. One evening, after another long day, Ryan stopped by my desk. He looked at the small candle jar sitting near my computer, rosewood calm. He picked it up, smirked, and said, "You know, maybe if you focused on work instead of playing shop, you'd actually get somewhere." He placed it back down, upside down, and walked away. Something broke inside me then. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but like the quiet snap of a thread stretched too far. I smiled to myself, though my eyes burned. Not anger yet. Not revenge. Just awareness. That night, I made a decision I didn't fully understand yet. I stayed up until 2 a.m. researching small business grants, marketing strategies, wholesale platforms. If he thought Kindle and Glow was a distraction, he was about to learn how dangerous distractions could become. The flame of my candle flickered again, brighter this time. And somewhere deep inside me, I knew it wasn't just light. It was the beginning of a fire. The betrayal didn't come crashing down all at once. It unfolded in quiet moments, the kind that creep up behind you, smiling until it's too late to step away. 2 weeks after Ryan's last snide remark, we had the biggest pitch of the quarter, a client that could make or break our department. I'd spent late nights perfecting the presentation deck, aligning the visuals, writing the tagline. It was mine, start to finish. Ryan knew it. Everyone knew it. The morning of the presentation, I walked into the conference room early, nerves tight but hopeful. My laptop was missing from the table. When I asked Ryan, he smiled casually and said, "Don't worry, Emma. I've got it covered." I made a few adjustments. Adjustments. That word should have set off alarms. But I told myself maybe he just polished a few slides. Maybe he was trying to help. Then the meeting began. Ryan took the stage with confidence, greeting the clients, charming them effortlessly. My heart pounded as I waited for him to introduce me, to pass me the clicker, to let me take the floor for the work I had built. He didn't. Slide after slide, I watched as my designs, my data, my ideas flashed on the screen under his name. He didn't even hesitate. He sold my vision as his own, weaving my words into his pitch like they were born from his brilliance. Every laugh, every nod of approval from the clients cut deeper than any insult he'd ever thrown at me. By the end of the meeting, when the clients stood to shake hands and praise him, I couldn't move. My body felt numb. My lips were smiling, but inside, something was dying. When everyone left, I stayed seated. The hum of the projector filled the silence. Ryan walked over, patted my shoulder, and said, "Teamwork, right?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my chair, to demand credit, to tell everyone the truth. But my voice, the same voice that once pitched ideas with excitement, had gone quiet. I went to the restroom, locked the door, and let myself break. The kind of quiet crying that doesn't even sound human, gasps, tremors, disbelief. I stared at my reflection, mascara streaked, eyes hollow. I whispered to myself, "You let him do this." And that was the worst part I had. I believed his mentorship meant protection. I believed that being good, being loyal, being quiet would earn me respect. But Ryan didn't respect quiet women. He used them. By the end of the day, he'd already taken full credit. The department head congratulated him in front of everyone. "Brilliant work, Ryan. You've outdone yourself again." And then, as if salt on an open wound, Ryan turned to me and said, "Couldn't have done it without my assistant." Assistant. The word lodged in my throat like a blade. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in my car in the office parking lot, staring at the building lights. I kept thinking of all the late nights, the weekends I'd sacrificed. For what? A pat on the head and a stolen idea. I opened my phone and checked Kindle and Glow's small online shop. I'd made 3 sales that week, 3 small candles that had shipped out in brown paper boxes. 3 strangers who believed in something I created. Tears blurred my vision. I wasn't just crying for the betrayal, I was crying because that tiny business, the one he mocked, was the only place where my work wasn't stolen, ridiculed, or dismissed. It was mine. The next morning, I walked into the office early. Ryan was already there, sipping his coffee. He looked up, smirked, and said, "Rough night? Don't take it personally. This is how the game works, Emma. You learn, you adapt. That's business." I met his eyes, and for the first time, I didn't look away. "Right," I said softly. "That's business." He laughed, thinking he'd won. But inside me, something shifted. My sadness folded itself neatly into something else, quiet, sharp, and focused. I wasn't angry in the loud, explosive way I expected. It was cleaner than that. More deliberate. He thought I was broken. He thought I'd walk away, like all the others he'd stepped over. But he didn't know me. Not really. Because if he had, he would have known I don't burn out. I burn slow. And sooner or later, I burn back. I walked out of that office knowing 2 things. I would never let anyone take credit for my work again. And Ryan was about to learn what happens when you underestimate someone who builds her own fire. The morning after Ryan's betrayal, I woke up with that hollow ache that comes after crying too much, the kind that makes your face feel swollen and your chest feel bruised. My alarm blared, same as always, but something inside me had gone completely still. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at my laptop bag, the one I'd carried to that office every day for the last 4 years. It looked smaller now, weaker somehow, as if it too had lost its fight. The thought hit me like a whisper from somewhere deep. No one's coming to save you, Emma. Not HR. Not the boss who turned a blind eye. Not the coworkers who stayed silent when Ryan took my work and wore it like a crown. I realized, painfully and completely, that waiting for fairness was the slowest way to die. I made a cup of coffee, black and bitter, and sat by the window of my tiny apartment. Outside, the city was already alive, people rushing, horns blaring, ambitions colliding. I stared at the chaos and thought, why am I fighting so hard to be part of a system that rewards the loudest liar in the room? That question burned all morning. By noon, I opened my laptop, not to check emails, not to scroll through work messages, but to open the dashboard of Kindle and Glow. My candle shop. My small, fragile dream that had been sitting quietly in the corner of my life, waiting for me to notice it. 3 orders had turned into 7 overnight. 7 people. 7 homes that would soon smell like cinnamon and courage since I had blended myself in my kitchen at 2 a.m. on sleepless nights. Something stirred inside me. For the first time in months, I smiled. I spent the rest of the day melting wax, mixing fragrances, cutting wicks. The rhythm of creation, heat, pour, cool, wrap, became therapy. Every jar I labeled felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. But that night, when my hands were sticky with wax and my kitchen was a mess of candle tins and boxes, I paused. My reflection in the window looked different, tired but alive. My eyes didn't look lost anymore. They looked awake. It wasn't about proving Ryan wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right. I started studying business articles, online marketing, small-scale branding. I watched YouTube videos on e-commerce strategy instead of Netflix. I joined local small business forums, asked questions, learned about packaging, customer service, and supply chains. Every late night became a brick in the foundation of something I could finally call mine. 2 weeks later, Ryan came to my desk at the office, coffee in hand and arrogance in full display. "Hey, you still doing that candle hobby thing?" he smirked. I didn't flinch. "Yeah," I said calmly. "Still doing it." He chuckled. "Cute. Just don't let it distract you from real work." I almost laughed. Real work. He didn't know that while he was busy taking credit for other people's ideas, I was learning how to build a business from the ground up. How to design my own logo, how to write a story behind every cent, how to create something people felt connected to. The following month, Kindle and Glow hit its first viral moment. A local influencer posted about one of my candles with the caption, "Smells like self-worth and second chances." Orders poured in dozens, then hundreds. My phone didn't stop buzzing. My tiny studio apartment turned into a warehouse of hope. I remember packing orders on my floor when the notification came, "We're out of stock." For a second, I just stared. Then I laughed, not out of joy, but out of disbelief. Out of freedom. That night, as I taped boxes and printed labels, I thought about Ryan. About the way he looked at me that day, smug, untouchable. He had mocked my small business, called it a cute hobby, something beneath his world of suits and PowerPoints. But now my hobby was paying my rent, growing faster than his department's entire quarterly performance. And still, I didn't feel the urge to gloat. I felt peace. Because I realized revenge wasn't just about taking something from someone. Sometimes, it was about taking yourself back. Ryan's voice no longer lived rent-free in my mind. His words, cute, assistant, not leadership material, had lost their weight. As I stood surrounded by candles flickering in the dark, I whispered to myself, "You were never small, Emma. You were just planted." And in that moment, with the scent of warm vanilla and sandalwood filling the room, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning of my rise. I wasn't broken anymore. I was becoming. Ryan still walked around the office like he owned it, same smug grin, same patronizing tone, same hollow jokes that made everyone fake laugh, just enough to keep their paychecks safe. But what he didn't realize was that the woman sitting 3 desks away, the one he used to dismiss as just the assistant with candles, was no longer the same Emma he once ridiculed. I had changed. And this time, I wasn't going to fight for a seat at their table. I was going to build a bigger one and make them ask for a chair. It started quietly. The first rule of smart revenge? Never let them see you planning it. By day, I continued showing up to work, keeping my head down, acting polite, predictable, the perfect background character in Ryan's little corporate play. I laughed at his shallow jokes, nodded through his condescending comments, and even brought coffee to team meetings when he forgot to order enough. He thought he'd broken me. In reality, I was gathering information. I noticed things: the investors' names in emails, the projects he took false credit for, the internal proposals he borrowed from my drafts. Every detail became a piece of a puzzle I was assembling silently. At night, once I returned to my apartment, now overflowing with candle jars, bubble wrap, and the faint scent of success, I'd open my laptop and shift into CEO mode. Kindle and Glow was expanding faster than I could track. Orders doubled every week. Influencers started tagging me, boutiques were reaching out for collaborations, and even corporate gift suppliers were interested in wholesale deals. That's when the idea struck, a poetic kind of justice. What if the very business Ryan mocked became the thing that exposed his incompetence? I began reaching out carefully, strategically, to small business networking events, investor mixers, and entrepreneurship panels. The same circles Ryan used to brag about attending. Only this time, I was the one receiving the invitations. I didn't tell anyone from work. I wanted them to see it with their own eyes when it was too late to rewrite the story. One Friday afternoon, I overheard Ryan talking to a new investor on the phone. His voice was slick, rehearsed. He was promising growth numbers that didn't exist, taking credit for client accounts I had managed myself. That was it. The final piece. I started compiling a quiet file, screenshots, project logs, timelines. Nothing illegal. Nothing exaggerated. Just truth, the kind of truth that doesn't scream, but bleeds when exposed. Then I started planting seeds. During lunch breaks, I'd casually talk about my side business with coworkers who still respected me. I didn't boast, I just mentioned milestones. We hit our 10,000 sale, I'd say softly. It's been a crazy year. Ryan overheard once. His smirk faltered, just slightly, before he muttered, "Well, let's hope your candles don't burn out." I smiled sweetly. Oh, they won't. They're designed to last. That night, I finalized the next step, a proposal for an eco-friendly corporate partnership. A collaboration between Kindle and Glow and a local office supply brand to create sustainable employee gifts. Guess which company's investors were attending the event where I'd present it? Ryan's. He was scheduled to speak that same night about innovative corporate leadership. Perfect. The following week, I worked double, managing my office responsibilities by day and preparing for my presentation by night. I didn't tell anyone from the company I'd be there. When the evening arrived, the event hall was a mix of suits, champagne, and shallow smiles. Ryan stood on stage first, spinning stories about his successful projects, exaggerating figures that were already sinking in real time. When my name was called next, he looked stunned, like he'd seen a ghost. "Please welcome Emma Carter, founder and CEO of Kindle and Glow," the host announced. I walked to the stage in a simple black dress, calm and deliberate. Every step echoed like punctuation in a sentence I had been writing for months. My presentation wasn't flashy, it was real. I spoke about sustainability, small business resilience, and authenticity in branding. I mentioned how corporate arrogance often blinds companies to innovation coming from unexpected places. The investors nodded. Some even clapped midway. I caught Ryan's reflection in the glass behind the crowd, jaw tight, smile frozen. When I finished, a few investors approached me personally, asking for a meeting. One of them, a major backer for Ryan's firm, said, "We've been looking for something fresh, something honest. Let's talk soon." Ryan tried to laugh it off later, claiming it was cute that I was dabbling in entrepreneurship. But I saw the fear behind his grin. He knew what was coming, even if he didn't want to believe it. Over the next few weeks, I made sure the right people saw the right things: the investors, the social media buzz, the article about Kindle and Glow in the local business paper that called it the small business that redefines modern gifting. Ryan's projects, on the other hand, began to falter. His false promises caught up with him. The investors started asking questions he couldn't answer, questions I already knew the real answers to. I didn't sabotage him. I didn't need to. I just let the truth speak. And the truth was louder than his lies ever were. He still thought I was small. He still thought he had time. But the storm was already forming, and he hadn't even noticed that I was the one controlling the weather. The night of the investor round felt unreal, like walking into a movie set where every light had been dimmed just enough to make the reveal bright. The venue was a converted loft downtown, concrete floor, strands of Edison bulbs, and a crowd that smelled faintly of cologne and curiosity. Ryan arrived in his usual swagger, pleased with himself, already collecting the small nods of people who mistook confidence for competence. I moved through the room like a ghost who belonged. Olivia, one of the investors I'd quietly briefed, hovered nearby like a discreet anchor. She wore a simple navy dress and a look that said, "We know what you did." We'd agreed on the signal. When I presented, she would stand and ask the first tough question, and the rest would follow. My hands were steady as I stepped up. I didn't need fireworks. I needed facts, restraint, and an audience that could see the difference between honesty and spin. I began with product, the design evolution, the genuine customer reviews, the sustainable supply chain. Then I moved into numbers, real margins, repeat purchase rates, B2B pilot programs I'd initiated with boutique retailers. I spoke plainly. My slides were clean. People leaned forward. Ryan, in the corner, tried to flash that old smile, but it felt thin. When Olivia asked her question, she didn't attack. She was practice and precision. "Emma," she said, "could you walk us through the logistics of large corporate gifting and how you ensure vendor transparency?" She was asking for details I'd already compiled: contracts, delivery manifests, proof of origin certificates. I answered, one document at a time, clicking through the evidence we'd gathered. The room went quieter, every listener compounding the truth. Then, on cue, I switched the narrative, not by shouting, but by showing. I displayed a side-by-side comparison. My invoices and delivery manifests next to a set of internal emails I'd legally obtained through the right channels that exposed Ryan's inflated vendor payments and missing deliverables on a corporate gifting contract. The name at the top of those internal docs was his. He'd promised high-end sourcing and delivered subcontractors. He'd promised margins and skimmed funds. The numbers were indisputable. You could see the color drain from his face. He mouthed something that wasn't a sentence. Lena, who had always liked being camera-ready, went pale and clutched at her drink. Silence is heavy when it's the sound of truth landing. One of the investors I'd wooed, a woman who had once backed our fledgling campaigns years ago, stepped forward. Calmly, she explained that fiduciary trust was the basis of any new capital commitment, and that any evidence of mismanagement, especially involving the diversion of vendor funds, would cause them to freeze investments pending full audits. She didn't accuse. She simply spoke the protocol. Reaction was immediate. Phones came out. Voices threaded through the crowd in worried murmurs. Someone texted a reporter a single line: "Possible investor freeze at Ryan's firm." Within minutes, the room's energy shifted from networking to crisis management. Ryan tried to salvage it with charm, the same tactics that had once smoothed over his lies. He joked about growing pains. He attempted to reframe some of the numbers as creative accounting. But when the auditors in the room, the same ones he'd once cultivated with lunches and promises, asked for a reconciliation, he couldn't produce it. The ledgers didn't match the glossy story he'd sold. The public part of his collapse was almost beautiful in its inevitability. An investor delegation asked to meet privately. They reviewed the documents, their faces closed like drawn curtains. One by one, they excused themselves. A senior partner who'd once toasted Ryan's leadership quietly took his name off a proposed press release. Someone nearby heard the phrase "suspend funding" and repeated it like a verdict. Outside, a journalist took a photo of Ryan standing alone on the patio, drink in hand, and the caption hit the feeds before midnight: "Top marketer under scrutiny after vendor discrepancies revealed at local pitch event." The same crowd that had once laughed at my candle business now watched a man struggle to explain how he'd hollowed out credibility. Ryan did not go down in a single theatrical fall. It was smaller memos, an interim board meeting, sudden HR inquiries. But the quiet destruction was absolute. Investors froze their checks, clients requested independent audits, procurement paused contracts. The small maneuvers that had propped up his swagger unraveled into red tape and forensic review. As the room emptied, I didn't cheer. I stood very still and allowed a soft satisfaction to settle into my bones. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't screaming accusations in the hallway. It was assembling a pattern of truth and letting it do the work. Watching him shrink under the weight of facts felt vindicating, yes, but more than that, it felt like restoration. On my way out, Ryan caught my eye briefly. He looked different, not just surprised, but stripped of performance. For a second there was something like regret or maybe shame. He opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to blame. I stepped past him without a word. Outside, the night air smelled like rain and new beginnings. The city hummed with lives that did not require permission from anyone else to continue. I breathed in deep, the scent of my candles on my coat from the samples I'd brought to give to investors. It smelled like cedar, like lavender, like endurance. He had mocked my small business. Now, in the space he'd built on other people's illusions, there were empty promises and paused contracts. Poetic, quiet, and complete. I walked home with my head held steady, not because I had won a battle, but because I had reclaimed a life. The storm had passed. The cleanup would be long. But the truth had been spoken in the language I understood best, evidence and calm. And as streetlights blurred into the wet pavement, I smiled a small, final smile. The quiet before had been preparation. The quiet after tasted like tomorrow. 6 months after that night, the night truth quietly dismantled arrogance. The world looked entirely different. Ryan's company didn't collapse overnight, but it crumbled piece by piece, like a wall eaten away by silence and time. The investors withdrew, the partners distanced themselves, and the press, once charmed by his polished image, began digging into the cracks beneath it. The reports were cold and factual: mismanagement, fabricated margins, leadership under scrutiny. Within weeks, Ryan was asked to step down. The man who used to laugh the loudest in meetings disappeared into a kind of professional fog. I didn't search for what happened next. I didn't need to. Some stories don't require sequels. They just need closure. For me, Kindle and Glow had become more than a business. It was a rebirth. We moved out of my apartment and into a bright, glass-walled studio that smelled faintly of wax, coffee, and ambition. The walls were lined with soft light, packaging tables, and shelves of jars that glowed like little suns. My small team, mostly women who'd left corporate jobs looking for meaning, worked with quiet joy. Every order, every customer email, every thank you note reminded me of what real success feels like. It's not loud. It's steady. It doesn't prove. It exists. Sometimes, when we got large wholesale requests, I'd pause and trace back the steps. How something that started as pain became purpose. How mockery became motivation. How loss built strength. The first time we signed a corporate partnership, I froze, not because it was big, but because of who the client was. The new management of Ryan's old firm had reached out, unaware of our history, asking if we could handle their corporate gifting for the holidays. Life has a wicked sense of poetry. I didn't gloat. I didn't decline. I simply sent a professional quote with a fair rate. Business is business. The contract came through 2 weeks later, full payment upfront. The same company that once paid Ryan to belittle my dreams now paid me to bring light into theirs. When the first shipment went out, I stayed late in the studio. The team had gone home, and the only light came from the rows of flickering candles waiting for pickup. I stood there for a long time in the same quiet I used to fear. It no longer felt empty. It felt sacred. My reflection stared back at me in the glass door, tired eyes, small smile, a woman who had burned but not broken. I thought about that version of me who used to cry in bathrooms after meetings, replaying his mocking words, cute little business. She deserved this moment. That's the thing about poetic justice, it doesn't roar. It whispers. It happens when the world stops looking and truth simply balances the scale. I never called Ryan. Never posted a "look at me now" speech. Because real power doesn't chase validation, it stands, silent and unshakable, in its own light. The next morning, I wrote a note to myself on the whiteboard above my desk. You were never too small. They were just too blind. It stayed there, untouched for months. As time passed, people started inviting me to speak at entrepreneurship panels. The woman who turned mockery into millions, they'd say. It always made me smile, not because of the numbers, but because of the story beneath them. Every time someone asked, "How did you handle the people who didn't believe in you?" I'd answer softly, "I stopped trying to convince them," and built something they couldn't ignore. And that's what I want you, the one watching this, to remember. If someone ever mocked your dream, your idea, your effort, don't waste your energy fighting for their approval. Build quietly. Heal privately. Let your results speak in rooms their words can't reach. One day, the same people who doubted you will have to live in a world shaped by what you created. That's not revenge. That's balance. As for me, I don't need closure anymore. I already have something better, peace. And every time I light one of my own candles, I remember how darkness doesn't end when someone flips a switch. It ends when you become the light yourself. He mocked the spark I started with, but in the end, it was my light that burned his empire down. Have you ever been underestimated, mocked, or betrayed, only to rise stronger? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice might be the spark someone else needs today. If this story hit home, like, share, and subscribe for more real, raw, empowering tales of transformation.